Tüm dünyanın sonucunu merakla beklediği Amerika Birleşik Devletleri başkanlık seçimi için New York'ta oy verme işlemleri devam ediyor. Şimdi bir başka noktadayız. Yanımızda Türk-Amerikan ilişkileri üzerine uzman Mark Mayrovitz var. Kendisiyle Türk-Amerikan ilişkilerini ve bu seçimin bu ilişkilere etkisini konuşacağız. Hi.
Merhaba.
Merhaba. How are you today?
Çok güzel.
So, what is your expectation about the election?
Right. Well, right now we don't know because the Electoral College is the way in which we elect the president, which is very hard to predict. Right now the polls are very close, and it's going to hinge on about 10 states. One of those is Ohio. So at the present time, it is impossible to predict. So it's really up in the stars, as they say, in the heavens. And they know the answers, but we really don't.
Okay. We know that Turkish-American relationship is very important.
Exactly.
And what do you think? What will happen after the election?
Well, I think there are two things we should focus on. One is the presidency, but we should also not forget to focus on the congressional races and the control of the Congress. The fact of the matter is that on Turkey, the United States foreign policy is going to be pretty much the same, whether Obama or Romney come into power. And there may be some change as to maybe tonality or tone, but basically the policy will be the same. In that, Turkey's a major power, it's a major friend of the United States, it's a NATO ally, and most importantly, right now with Syria, it's a very important partner in trying to deal with the Arab Spring. So whoever the president is going to be working with Turkey very closely to work out a solution on those issues. Now, as far as the Congress is concerned, that's a whole other story. Because in the Congress, that is very, very important for Turkey.
So can we say that the Congress is more important than the president?
Well, our system is basically separation of powers and checks and balances, so they're both very, very important. Now, Obama is a known quantity with respect to Turkey, although the truth of the matter is that right now the Turkish leadership is not so happy with American foreign policy. One of the reasons is because of this election that we're having today. And the fact is that the president has not focused on Turkey and on foreign policy. He's focusing on trying to get reelected. So right now he's not focusing on it. If he's reelected, we'll be back on looking at this issue and trying to handle all the problems in the Middle East, including the Arab Spring. As Romney becomes president, he's going to have to do the same thing. He's going to have to sit down with the Turkish leadership, have a good relationship with them, because that's vitally, vitally important, especially about Syria. Syria is a very complicated issue for Turkey, for the U.S., and the whole Arab Spring is a big issue. What to do with Egypt, Libya, all these countries. Iran is the big issue. So, Americans and Turks have to roll their sleeves up, sit down and work them out, whether it's Romney or Obama. But as far as the Congress is concerned, the Republican hold on the Congress will be very important for Turkey. When the Democrats were in control...
Is it good or is it bad?
Well, for Turkey, when the Democrats, again, I'm not trying to be partisan, but when the Democrats control Turkey, they passed resolutions in the Committee on Foreign Affairs, and they even tried to bring a genocide resolution onto the floor of the Congress. That was defeated in 2010, literally in the last minutes of the congressional session. The Republicans so far, I say very, from my point of view, very happily for Turkey, have not passed any resolutions of any kind. The chairman of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, who is Congresswoman Ros-Lehtinen, has had some strong statements about the Middle East and strong statements, but no resolution has ever been passed in that committee. And I would expect that if the Republicans control the House, that's not going to happen again. Now remember, in the past, going back as far as 1974, when there was a boycott of Turkey as a result of Cyprus, many of the anti-Turkish maneuvers in the U.S. government have come from the Congress, not from the president. The State Department runs foreign policy. The State Department wants to have smooth and good relations with Turkey, major country, and actually really a fulcrum of stability, a secular country in the middle of a region that is in turmoil. And we have this friend, and that's our friend. It doesn't make a difference, Romney, Obama. The State Department is going to work hard with Turkey to make that region work and also to help Turkey to deal with its issues, in particular the PKK. And Ambassador Richard Doney has said recently, we want to help you, and that's the attitude of the United States. That's not going to change Romney or Obama. But the Congress, if the Congress goes Democratic and is controlled by the Democrats, then you have a potential, again, of a real rupture in U.S.-Turkish relations. So we know the last time the resolution was passed in the House committee, the diplomatic circle in Turkey was extremely upset and that caused a rift in Turkish-U.S. relations. That did not come from the president. The president was the one who smoothed it out. So I think at the end of the day, they're both important, but we should look to the Congress. Now, about tone, I did want to say about Romney, in terms of tone, there could be a change in that Romney might want to work a little bit in a different way about patching up relations between Turkey and Israel. That's possible because of Romney's position on Israel and so forth. I don't see anything very significant there, although I really believe, from my point of view, Israel, Turkey, and the U.S. are aligned on the same position in trying to deal with the Arab Spring in Syria to keep the region stable. And why should the region be stable? So that Turkey can continue to develop its economic miracle towards 2023, where the Prime Minister has said we want to be the number, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4 country in the world economically. In 10, okay, I'm going to hope for 1 or 2 or 3, inshallah. But my point is that in order to get there, we need a stable region. And Turkey has to be able to trade with its partners and be able to have open and free trade and not to have all these bumps and glitches like planes flying over and planes being brought down with radars and equipments and all this nonsense. I should also mention Russia, because Russia is also an important factor. And the United States is going to have to work very hard to maneuver that too, because that is a key issue for Turkey. Relies on most of its natural gas on Russia. Therefore, can't play around with that either. So there's a lot of big issues happening. The president, whoever the president is, irrelevant, is going to have this on their plate, have to deal with it. Right now it's been a little bit in abeyance, and the Turks are not happy about it, but I think they'll be happy once there's an election and once they can get the focus of the president on the foreign policy.
The personal relationships are very important, there
right.
is a very good relationship between Prime Minister Erdogan and President Obama. How can you evaluate this situation?
Well, I mean, the personal relationships, I think that President Obama has said that he speaks to Prime Minister Erdogan. I think Erdogan maybe of the top 2, 3, 4, 5 leaders on the phone constantly. And that's not surprising because Turkey's a very important country. And I don't expect that's going to change. I have to say, though, that the photograph of President Obama sitting with a baseball bat and talking to Prime Minister Erdogan also, I think, made people a little bit queasy about that. So, the personal relationship is very important. And having those relations, I would think that if Romney's elected president, he's going to want to have a good personal relationship. Prime Minister Erdogan, and honestly, it's really a matter of the benefit to Turkey. It's in Turkey's benefit and Turkey's advantage to have a good relationship with the U.S. president. Turkey has got some really big issues and really big problems, in particular now the whole issue with Syria, okay, and the PKK. These are big issues, existential issues for Turkey. And frankly, it's not that they need help, but they need friends in the world. And a good friend to have is the U.S., because the U.S. is an international power, and it can help Turkey. It really can bring to bear help in Turkey's difficult time. Turkey committed itself to help the Syrian rebels. It did a good thing. It said, I'm going to do a good thing. I'm going to help these people who are being massacred by this maniac, okay? But as a result of that, as happens sometimes, good intentions get you possibly some problems. So Turkey's got problems now. It does. It's in there, it's involved, and it's got some pushback from Iran, from Russia. And also, Turkey had a good relationship with Iran, and now the relationship with Iran is not so steady, not so good. And that's problematic because the Turkish-Iranian relationship with a huge border has been stable, very stable. And over not just 5 years, 10 years, but since time immemorial. That's now in question as well. So in order to balance that out, you need to have the U.S. and Turkey aligned. And I also say the other countries, Egypt, of course, Turkey's reaching out to Egypt, and Israel, and these countries can all work together to keep the situation stable so that, as I said before, Turkey can develop its economy. This is very important. It cannot develop its economy in the effective way that it needs to if it has these existential problems. That's going to divert their attention and the resources, and they're going to have to spend a lot of money on defense and armament and all that, and they could spend that money better on developing trade and the economy. Turkey is the economic miracle, but it also can't be diverted by these security threats. And there the United States can really, really help in making that happen.
I want to turn back to Syria issue.
Sure.
What is your expectation? What kind of specific steps can Obama or Romney can get after the election? What is your specific expectations?
Well, it's very hard to know. I think that as far as, now Romney did at one point give a speech to the Virginia Military Institute on his foreign policy perspective. And he criticized President Obama for not committing more weaponry and maybe troops, who knows what. He was very, and I read that, but I thought to myself, that's being a little naive because he's not the president, he's the challenger. So it's easy for the challenger to say, send troops, send armament, send that. And that's exactly the problem that Erdogan has too. Prime Minister has a problem because once you get in there and you start sending troops, you're going to have casualties. First of all, America just withdrew from Iraq and withdrew from Afghanistan. It is not going to commit troops, that's for sure. I mean, NATO or otherwise, I don't think so. Because once you start having American casualties, no president wants that. I don't believe so. On the other hand, as far as Turkey is concerned, I don't believe that Turkey is going to make the step of sending troops in there. I don't think it's popular. I think the Turkish populace is not in favor of that. I think based on the opinion polls that have been taken. So the American-Turkish populace are not in favor. So the question is what to do. The first primary issue is to figure out who the rebels are and who you want to support. Right? Hillary Clinton says, I don't want to support this group, I want to support this group. Prime Minister Erdogan is supporting one group. How about getting one group that we're going to support together, one group of rebels that we're going to support together, and try to bolster them? And also use international diplomatic pressure to continue to isolate Iran. Because I think Iran is weakened significantly now in the Middle East, there's no question. Hezbollah is weakened, and certainly Iran is weakened by the sanctions. Iran can claim all along that they're going to do this and do that and use nuclear and that, but they can't, because if they do that, they'll destroy their economy. So they're not going to do that. So therefore, all they have is a threat. They don't really have the power now. They've been diminished. Turkey is on the upsurge. The Turkish-Iranian balance is in favor of Turkey. That's good for the U.S., good for stability. So I think Turkey, NATO, the U.S. will sit down and figure out who they want to support and figure out the best way to make a transition in Syria. But the transition in Syria is not simple because of the existence of the various factions in Syria. It's not so simple. You have the Alawites, you have the Muslim Brotherhood, and then you have, complete mishmash. And the Kurdish group that's in the north now and has their own enclave. They have an enclave, which is now the Syrian troops have withdrawn, and this is well known to all Turks know all this. And once they have withdrawn, the Syrians are there. Now, Prime Minister Erdogan has said, you're not getting an enclave, you're not getting an entity like Barzani. At the end of the day, the Turks will have to work with the Syrian Kurds. It's going to be very interesting to see that whole development. But I think they have to have a policy that coordinates with U.S., with Europe, with all the countries together to figure out what to do in this transition without committing Turkish troops and without committing American troops. Now, it's possible that NATO might get involved.
Do you think, is it possible?
It's certainly possible. I mean, Turkey did invoke the NATO treaty when the shelling at Akçakale occurred, if you remember. Turkey right away said, we're NATO, we were attacked, we want to be protected. That's the treaty. That's the idea of collective security. But it's very hard to know whether we're going to do another NATO incursion into Syria. Who are we going to support? Who are we going to fight against? Because there's so many different groups that are fighting with each other. At the end of the day, probably, in reality, maybe Assad will topple. And you're going to have you'll have a Kurdish region, you'll have Latakia with an Alawite region, and you'll have the Muslim Brotherhood and the rebels.
Kind of federation.
A federation, or probably a lack of a federation, in the sense that they'll all be fighting with each other. I would say more a civil war than a federation, in the sense that these groups don't get along, they haven't gotten along, and once you sort of take off, it's kind of Humpty Dumpty. We have a Humpty Dumpty poem. Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall, he fell off the wall, he broke into pieces, and we couldn't put him back together again. So at the end of the day, Syria is like that. Like when you take a pot and it falls down, you try to paste it together, you never get that back together the way it looked. That's Syria. Syria is breaking apart. So I think at this point, the question is how to manage that transition so it does not spill over into Turkey, like, for example, with the PKK, if you see what I'm saying. In other words, that's the existential issue for Turkey. Turkey helped the rebels, and then it got the pushback from the PKK. So the United States has to work with Turkey to suppress that pushback and protect Turkey. And as long as it does that, I think that's going to be, the way they have to go, and I have to be pragmatic in how to do that.
My last question is about U.S.-Israel relationship.
Okay.
And the Netanyahu government, they support Romney, but the Jewish people in the United States, they mostly support Obama. And what do you think about this? Why?
Well, I mean, it's not a secret that Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Obama have not had the best relationship that you can have between two leaders.
What is the main problem?
Well, I think it's that Israel and Turkey have had some bumpy times, some difficulties, and of course the Mavi Marmara incident was a big problem for Turkish-Israeli relations. There's no question about it. And as a result of that, Turkey downgraded its ambassadorial status, and so there are no ambassadors now in Israel and Turkey. It's very unfortunate, in my opinion, because right now you need to have ambassadors because there's a lot of stuff going on that are important. And the fact of the matter is Turkey and Israel still have diplomatic relations. It's just that we're downgraded. Now, as far as Netanyahu supporting Romney, I don't know that he supports Romney, but let's put it this way. The now I have to say this, some Israeli leaders have said outright that they are very supportive of Obama and think Obama's been very helpful to Israel. And some others have said no, but it's not a consensus. Now, to your point about the Jewish community, this is a very interesting point. Now, it's true that I think in the last election, 70 or 80% of the Jewish community voted for Obama and a smaller percentage for Romney. Most of the pollsters believe that's going to be replicated again, maybe with some distinctions. And the reason for that is that the Democratic Party has traditionally had a coalition of various ethnic groups, Jews, African Americans, and this goes back to President Franklin Roosevelt. And so the Democratic Party has not lost that coalition, and the Republican Party, to be very candid, has not won that coalition over. There are some issues in the Republican Party that have nothing to do with Middle East or Turkey or anything that Jews are not crazy about. For example, the Republican positions on women's rights, the Republican position on abortion, contraception, on religion. The Jewish community is not crazy about those Republican ideas, so they stay with the Democratic Party and President Obama. Now, as far as the foreign policy is concerned in Israel, I'm hopeful that Israel and Turkey will patch up their differences. I'm sure they're talking all the time because, to me, it's in Turkey's interest to have a good relationship with Israel, which it always had, and not to have that, to me, is a problem because the Middle East is in turmoil, and the countries that are stable are not too many. Turkey is a very stable country, and also Israel. And there is a natural, in my opinion, affinity between the two countries in terms of outlook, modern countries. And to be very candid, if you look at the numbers, the trade between Israel and Turkey is going up, up, up. But the political relations are shoyla boila, not so good, not so good. Now, and so trade going up, political relations, because there is a feeling. It's more about a feeling of having this incident and these bad relations. And my feeling is that people can work out situations like that. We work them out all the time with our friends, with our relatives. We have something. And I feel that the relationship between the two countries is something like friends or relatives that had a falling out. And it was a pretty serious falling out of Imam Marmara. There's no question about it. That was a terrible incident. I'm not downplaying it whatsoever. On the other hand, we have to get over it. Why? Because we've got to move on, because there's so many pressing issues in the area, Syria, the Middle East, Iran, you name it, a ton of issues on which Turkey and Israel really could work together and see eye to eye. And I should also mention on Cyprus, I mean, look, there's a huge deposit of resources in Cyprus. Now, wouldn't it be great if Turkey and Israel would work together on that issue and be able to see eye to eye on that one? That could be a win-win I was in Cyprus, in Kuzey Kıbrıs, in the summer, and those resources are desperately needed for the North, which is boycotted by the whole world unfairly. They could use those resources. Wouldn't it be great if Israel and Turkey worked together to get those resources and share them and allocate them to the Northern Cyprus people so that they could have a better life? I see all these good things that could happen out of a good relationship. So I think down the road, whoever the president is, will have to work with Israel, U.S., and Turkey together to work towards a more peaceful, stable Middle East where there's trade and all good relations.
There is an election in Israel after this election. Right. So, what do you think? Is there any connection between this election and the election in Israel?
I don't think so, but I did want to mention one more thing. I don't think there's a great connection between the two, to be very candid. But one thing I didn't mention is the whole idea of coalition politics in Israel. Now, Foreign Minister Lieberman, I would have to say, would not be on the most popular list in Turkey these days. And some of the things, some of the positions that he has taken, I mean, in my personal opinion, Aramizda, are really, I just don't understand them. I mean, I don't fathom the points that he's making. I think that there, the foreign minister should be following the prime minister. But the problem is, in the coalition politics, because Lieberman doesn't have to listen to Netanyahu. He doesn't have to listen. I mean, in Turkey, to make it clear to Turks, I'm thinking that Ahmet Davutoglu is talking to the prime minister. If the prime minister says something to him, he listens to it. But not in Israel. Lieberman can talk all he likes, and he doesn't care what Netanyahu wants. And deep down, I'm quite sure that Netanyahu wants to have very smooth relations with Turkey and doesn't want any problems with Turkey. But then Lieberman comes up with these ideas, to be very frank about it, that are, I think, extremely illogical. Coming up with, I don't know if they're true or not, and I'm reading the Turkish press, but, we should negotiate with the PKK, or we should pass a resolution on Armenia or something like this. These are ideas that are, I think, catastrophic ideas. They are detrimental ideas. They're not good ideas. But he brings them up, then he withdraws them. And the whole issue with the low chair incident with the Israeli diplomats, which is quite famous in Turkey, was done by the foreign ministry. The fact of the matter is, a Turkish diplomat with whom I'm very close said to me, Mark, why do they pick on diplomats? We're the ones that want the stability. We want smooth. We want nice. So the problem you have is politics. Politics is always the problem. And in Israel, there's the same problem. You have politicians saying their opinion and thinking what they want to think and not working in one way to try to make this friendship work. But as far as how the Jewish community supports Obama, supports Romney, I think, all the ethnic groups, basically, that we're talking about, are very supportive of President Obama.
But
yes.
I want to ask, they don't endorse any candidate, Obama or Romney. They don't endorse one of them. Why?
Well, to be very candid, I don't know I can't really philosophize on their thinking. I could just surmise and suggest the reason. I think that, first of all, the reason not for an organization not to endorse someone is that if you're wrong, then people will hold it up in your face for the next 4 years and say you were wrong. So that's maybe the reason they're doing that. But I think that the focus of that lobby is really on the Congress. Okay, that's where the main efforts have been made to pass resolutions in the House in particular, more so than the Senate, which are basically taking the position about the events in Armenia as being quote-unquote genocide. Now, that, to me, is their focus. That's what they're shooting for. They're working their way towards 2015, and they want to have these resolutions passed. And that's why they're...
Is it possible?
Well, as I said before, it depends who controls the House. Is it possible? Well, anything's possible. If the Democrats take the House, it's possible that they'll bring it up again. They will bring it up like they did in 2010. Now, with the concerted effort of the Turkish-American community, it was defeated. Now, I think that the Turkish-American community is much better organized with the very, very good leadership that they have now, for example, in the Federation, TADF, and other organizations where they have excellent, Ali Chinar is the head of that organization, and doing an excellent job to organize the Turkish-American community in a much, much more effective way. That's the American way of life. Any group that wants to organize can organize. But besides that, so I think the Turkish-American community is going to be very effective. If it's going to come up again, if the Democrats take the House, then they're going to work hard to defeat it like they did the last time. Now, the other point of it is, in my opinion, I have to say that I think that if it came to that, again, you'd have the same situation where whoever is the president, Romney, Obama, irrelevant, the State Department will be saying to the president, Mr. President, tell the Congress not to pass this resolution. And why is that? Because the State Department runs foreign policy. The House does not and the Senate does not run foreign policy. They're advised on foreign policy, but the actual day-to-day foreign policy is done by the State Department, and sometimes the House forgets that. And they don't realize that they pass a resolution stating something about Turkey that the Turkish leadership is going to get understandably upset about it, and it's going to interfere with U.S.-Turkish relations, and it's going to interfere with what America wants to do in terms of its interests, and of course it will interfere with Turkish-U.S. relations. What would be the point of that? The pressure that the lobbies are getting from their constituents, with the Armenian lobby, to push for these resolutions. They are counterproductive. First of all, I should mention that the resolutions that they have passed so far in the committees are non-binding. If you know what I mean by non-binding, they are not legal. They are just a matter of stating something. So why pass something that's non-binding, that is going to upset the whole relationship between Turkey and the United States for no good reason, when it's the State Department that's going to be interfered with doing its job to keep the Middle East and the area around in the region stable. So that's my point about that lobby. Yes, they're going to try. They will continue to try to pass those resolutions, because I think that there's part of their end game to get that resolution so that the Congress of the United States, you know, the founders of the United States, Jefferson and great presidents like Lee, that country passed the resolution that said that, even though it's non-binding. And I think that's really counterproductive and inappropriate to do that. Because once again, the foreign policy that's not the job of the committee. The committee's supposed to comment on it. The committee is supposed to review it, but they're not supposed to interfere with U.S.-Turkish relations, which is what they've done. So I believe that they're predicting that the Republicans are going to take the House. If the Republicans take the House, the Republican leadership is not going to put that forward. So then I think that would be very good for Turkey, because then Turks can focus on their relationship with the U.S., and if there's a new president, focus on that, and not have the distraction which we've had in the past. For example, in 2010, if you remember, when the House committee passed that resolution, I mean, I think plane loads of diplomats from Turkey were coming here, and there was tremendous upset in Turkey, and just tremendous upset over a resolution. And similarly, I should mention that Rick Perry, I don't know if you remember this, yes, when he got on that debate and he made a comment about Turkey, he's just a candidate. The Turkish government was very upset about that. Now, did they realize he's a candidate and he's not going to be president? And I think he dropped out the next day. But the point is atmospherics. Statements that are made like that by national leaders or by Congress will upset the relationship. So I think our leaders here have to be very sensitive to know when they say something that they're not just going to make a statement. Why are they saying it? Constituent pressure. That's why. They're getting constituent pressure from their constituents to make certain statements. So they should have to pay a little attention to their national interest and their interest to let the State Department do its job. Because there's a lot of, as we say in English, a lot of fish to fry. I'm sure there's a Turkish proverb. There's a lot of issues there. And just pushing this one issue to the detriment of the stability of the region, I think is illogical.
Thank you so much for your participation.
It was my tremendous pleasure. And let's see now. Let's see. İyi seçim günleri.
Thank you.
Happy Election Day.
Thank you.
Okay, all the best. Thank you. Görüşmek üzere.
Görüşmek üzere.
Okay.